All right, let's do some announcements. I got my end up getting the gavel there and pounding it. Einstein. Yeah, so that's what I gotta say. Einstein. I'll leave that up to you. A week of learning, no, not a week of learning, a year of learning sponsored by you, Julia Boris Kagan, to commemorate the yard site by Julia's father, Yosef Ben Motto. Okay, we have a busy schedule next week. We have on Monday, David Heiser is doing a breakfast for your father or mother, I forget it. Your mother, okay? So on Monday, you get to make a reservation for that. I'll send something out today. And on Wednesday is the birthday club for right, you also need a reservation for that as well, but I'll be sending that out sometime today. Okay, today's breakfast is sponsored by Wally and Ronnie Greene to commemorate Roy Greene's father's yard site, which is tomorrow on the 7th of Alexander Greene, Menashe Ben Eliezer. Shama should have an Aliyah.
Okay. The topic today is not a new topic. It's been debated for centuries. And it's a topic that my father, Oliver Sholem, would have loved to talk about. Intuitively, he had some strong opinions about it. Just a brief word. Tomorrow is my father's yard site. He was the youngest of 7 children, and the only one that maintained any semblance of Yiddishkeit. All of his siblings, at one point or other, left Hungary. Some went to South America, some went to Australia, some came to America. When he was trying to escape the draft of the Hungarian army, he couldn't get to America because there was a quota system. And so he went to South America, Chile. And then from Chile, he came to America as a stowaway. Interesting story there by itself. But his father, if anybody's ever been to Budapest, the Dohányi Synagogue, a beautiful, now it's a museum, it was a beautiful, beautiful synagogue in Dohányi Street. My grandfather was the, I guess it's called the Chazan Sheni in that particular institution. And then when he was able to get out as a rabbi, and for a short period of time before he passed away, he was the rabbi at the famous Pike Street Synagogue in Lower Manhattan. Anyhow, tomorrow is his yard site, and our discussion today is Ilui Nishmaso, Menashe Ben Eliezer. It's an old topic. It's still with us today. We're still debating it, whether it's better to negotiate or to fight. What is the better in terms of Israel, in terms of the holy places, in terms of the country? Do we negotiate, or do we simply say, no, this is ours and we have to fight for it no matter what it takes? And this is a debate that goes on from biblical times. We know, of course, that Moshe and Yoshua took Israel by might, by force. It was armies. It was a martial conflict. Yet, the same Torah that describes how they had to fight to get Eretz Yisrael says when you engage in a war, it's preferable to engage in a less violent war, a siege perhaps, so that you don't lose lives. The debate is still going on today, obviously. What I want to focus on a few days before Tisha B'Av is the serious machlokas that took place in the time of the Churban Beis Hamikdash, or the time right before it, and certainly right afterwards. The Romans had besieged Yerushalayim. Now, they didn't attack Yerushalayim. The Greek historians tell us that they had just come back from a big campaign in Africa. The soldiers retired, and Titus and Vespasian were not interested in actual warfare, so they besieged Jerusalem. Lasted for 2.5, 3 years. In Jerusalem, we discussed this before, the Gemara Greene tells us that there were 3 very distinct parties in how to deal with the Romans. There was one group that says, let's go and fight. We can take them. Silly, but that's what they wanted to do. Another party said, we can't go up against the Roman army. Let us surrender and take our best shot. And the rabbis had the intermediary party, and they said, well, we're not going to surrender, and we can't obviously fight, but well, maybe we can negotiate something and save something. Asola Porto. It's fascinating that his own nephew, Yochanan ben Zakkai's nephew, was the leader of the Zealot party that wanted to fight Rome. And what they did was they had enough food to last for 21 years. They could have lasted out the siege. 21 years. What did the Kanoim do? They burnt all the storehouses of food, forcing them to do something. People are starving in the street. The Gemara describes how they were eating garbage and scraps. It's a horrible, terrible famine going on, and we read about it in Eicha as well. So things are pretty bad. Yochanan ben Zakkai conferred with his nephew, the Zealot leader, and said, I got to get out of here and do something. And that's the famous story when he meets with Vespasian. And Vespasian, who's then the general in charge, who eventually became the emperor of Rome, he escapes, and he's brought to Vespasian, and surprisingly enough, Vespasian says, what do you want? So it's an opening to ask. So this is the psychological drama here. Yochanan ben Zakkai, the great sage, was put on the spot. He didn't expect Vespasian to say, what do you want? So he had to decide on the spur of the moment what to ask for. Big problem. And for the rest of his life, he was frustrated, and he kept on asking himself, what if I could have asked for more? What if I could have, he asked me what I want, I should have told him. And on the spur, he didn't come to him with an organized plan. He came to him just trying to save something. That's all a porta. So he asked, ultimately, he asked for Yavne, and send all the Chachamim to Yavne, and we'll establish a yeshiva there, and do what you will with Yerushalayim, but at least save the Chachamim, and a few other things he asked. And he, on his deathbed, he was worried. Did I do the right thing? Should I have asked him to save Yerushalayim? And the Gemara discusses it. And the conclusion that he came to is he wouldn't have come all this way and besieged the city to give it back to him. He wouldn't have given it that. But he was troubled by it. He was troubled by it. Rav Soloveitchik, in one of his essays, talks about the internal struggle that was going on inside Yochanan ben Zakkai, whether he should have asked to save the Beis HaMikdash. All right, you want to run the city, put it on the Roman, but save the Beis HaMikdash. And he was worried about it. He was very frustrated as to whether or not he made the right decision. And the takeaway, of course, is that don't make decisions too quickly, think them through, but he didn't have that opportunity. Okay. Now, this approach, so Yochanan ben Zakkai was unable to save Yerushalayim. The temple was destroyed, but he reestablished the Sanhedrin in Yavne. Yavne became the new Yerushalayim, and he established many halachos that would only apply to Yerushalayim. He said they now apply in Yavne, in terms of shofar, in terms of sukkah, a lot of halachos that only pertain to Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim has now been transplanted to Yavne, Torah Sheba'al Peh was kept alive, and so forth and so on. From that perspective, he was successful. Yerushalayim, Beis Hamikdash, was destroyed. Could he have saved it? We don't know. Probably not. But we'll never know. And that was his frustration. Fast forward another 50 years or so, and you have another great scholar, Rabbi Akiva. Totally different perspective. Rabbi Akiva was a very black and white kind of guy. For him, the most important thing was Torah. Yerushalayim was already gone. Nothing you can do about that. But preserving Torah was the most important thing in the world to Rabbi Akiva. Not only preserving Torah, but also preserving Jewish sovereignty, Jewish independence. The minute he heard what Yochanan ben Zakkai did, he jumped on him. The Gemara tells it right there. Rabbi Akiva says, why didn't you ask for Yerushalayim? You had an opportunity. Why didn't you ask for it? And the answer was, I didn't think I would get it. Is that a good answer? I want to have a Hatzalah Port. I wanted to save something. You should have asked for it anyway. All that could have happened is he could have said no. So we have two different perspectives. Yochanan ben Zakkai was a negotiator. I'm sorry. Rabbi Akiva was an absolutist. Yerushalayim, Torah, Beis Hamikdash, that's the important thing. Beis Hamikdash was gone. Torah was trying to be maintained, and he wanted to get back Jewish sovereignty. There were two things, sovereignty and Torah. Okay? He had an opportunity. Now, was he misguided? History will probably say perhaps. What did Rabbi Akiva do? Rabbi Akiva saw this guy, his name was Bar Kokhba. He said, this is the man that will lead us back to Jewish independence. We will mount an army and we will fight the Romans. Because the Romans now still were not successful. They destroyed Yerushalayim. They hadn't yet destroyed Yiddishkeit. And so they understood. We have to look to our enemies to understand what's important in Judaism. What were the things that the Romans outlawed? Shabbos, Bris Milah, and learning Torah. They threw people in jail for teaching Torah. They understood without Torah there would be no Jewish people. Rabbi Akiva traveled the length and breadth of Israel, and even outside of Israel, drumming up support for a revolt against Rome. How realistic is it for Jews that hadn't had a standing army to revolt against the mighty Roman army is a separate question. But he was so motivated. He was not a negotiator. He was not one who made compromises. Torah is important. You can't live as Jews without Torah. And he traveled and he got support for that. Not only that, but to increase the support for a revolution, he proclaimed Bar Kokhba as the Mashiach. That's a radical step to take, but that showed how strongly he believed in fighting for independence. His mantra was, we have only one master, Kadosh Baruch Hu. Judaism is not allowed to be subservient to any human ruler. Therefore, we have to rebel against Rome and retake Yerushalayim and establish Jewish sovereignty. And in order to do that, we're going to proclaim Bar Kokhba. There's the pasuk, Dorach Kochav b'Yakov, Dorach Kuzma b'Yakov. The star was Bar Kokhba. In the end, it didn't work out. We'll talk about that in a moment. But Bar Kokhba was proclaimed the Mashiach. If you look in the Yerushalmi and Tanis, fascinating Yerushalmi, on the pasuk, Dorach Kochav b'Yakov, Rabbi Akiva says this is Melech Mashiach. Bar Kokhba is the Mashiach. His colleague, a guy named Yochanan ben Torta, you don't see his name too often. Yochanan ben Torta replies to his colleague he calls him by his first, he doesn't call him Rabbi Akiva, he says Akiva. Calls him by his first name. It says, Yale asovim bil chayayich v'adayin bil David lo yovo. A grass will sprout from your cheeks. Meaning you'll be dead and buried a long time. The Shiach still won't be here. Now the rabbis didn't agree completely with Rabbi Akiva's proclamation. The Rambam says that, he used an expression, that Rabbi Akiva carried Bar Kokhba's armor. It doesn't mean it literally, but I mean, he was a big supporter of Bar Kokhba. Bar Kokhba was a very great general, but a little bit too much. Had a great army, the best soldiers. And to prove how brave they were, he had them cut off one of their thumbs to show how brave they were. But they were maiming, the rabbi said, what are you doing? You can't maim your own soldier. So they had a second test. You had to ride on a horseback and uproot a small tree with your arm. That was a test, like the special forces in the army. Right, so they were the best. And they had many, many great victories. Ultimately, of course, it was foolish to go up against the Roman army. And ultimately, Bar Kokhba became known as Bar Kuzba, the false one. It didn't cause anything a lie. But these are two distinct approaches towards Jewish sovereignty. Do we negotiate to save something? Or do we go all out and say, no, this is ours, this is holy, and we have to keep it at all costs, and we fight. Yeah.
The second one, that first one, the worst way to go is probably the right way. But it was. The second way, they're basically going too far. And the first one, you could have gone far, or you could have basically taken a compromise. They took a compromise position. It seems to me that the first way of doing things,
well, again,
was correct.
The compromise did preserve Torah.
Right.
But
you could have lost everything. Yeah, they went too far, and they ended up losing everything.
On the other hand, we didn't have Yerushalayim or a standing army until 1967. It's a long time.
Wally,
Yeah.
remember the old Yiddish saying that the hindsight is 20/20.
Of course. Okay. Again, but the debate is still going on today. Look what's going on in Israel today. Do we compromise? Do we negotiate? Or do we all out and say, this is who we are, this is what we require, and that's it? And then this is Rabbi Akiva versus Yochanan and Zakkai, and they both have arguments to support their positions. Yeah, Avi.
In recent times, in recent past, we have no negotiating partner of real stature. Rome was a negotiating partner. Rome, that's why Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai negotiated. Today, you can't say it's a negotiation. It's just we can negotiate with the Arabs. You can't negotiate. So it's just the mechanism of negotiating.
Well, again, without getting too deep into the politics of the current situation, the key player in all of this is Saudi Arabia. If there was some way for Israel and Saudi Arabia to achieve a rapprochement of some type, the other Arab nations would fall in line, in all probability. But Israel refuses, Saudi Arabia refuses to recognize Israel. And again, Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state is being debated right now. Should Israel exist as just another democratic state or a socialist state, or should it dafka remain a Jewish state? And how Jewish is a Jewish state? These are all internal debates as well as external debates. The story of Yochanan ben Zakkai on his deathbed. He's very worried when he gets to Shemayim and he stands for the Kisei HaKavod, when Hashem says, you made the right call, or perhaps you should have been like your nephew and gone to fight against Rome, even though it would have been a lost battle. What do you fight for? What do you have a realistic expectation of winning? I certainly don't have a clear-cut answer. But the debate is an old debate. On the one hand, we lost Jerusalem, we lost the Beis Hamikdash. On the other hand, Torah was maintained in Yavne. That became the new Jerusalem. And what has preserved the Jews all these years? Not a physical location, but the Torah, studying Torah. Whether it was in Jerusalem, whether it was in Yavne, whether it was in Eastern Europe or Turkey or Algeria or Africa, wherever else people may have been around and had great yeshivos. So ultimately, perhaps, Rabbi Akiva was theoretically right, but in practical terms, Yochanan ben Zakkai was correct. Even though he himself had his own doubts. Could I have asked for more? Would he have given me more? But he was on the spot. When he escaped to see Vespasian, he didn't have a plan in mind. Now, when he was captured, he sneaks out in this coffin, and he makes his way to the camp, and he starts talking in riddles because the Romans loved riddles, and they put him in a chamber, a prison basically, a room within a room within a room. It was totally black, and they kept on asking him, "What time is it? What time is it?" To see if he in fact was in some way elevated or prophetic in some way, that he could tell what time it was in a pitch black room 24 hours a day. And he was able to tell him exactly what time it was. How did he know that? Was he a Navi? No.
He had a watch.
He didn't have a watch. And a watch, and he didn't have luminous dials then either. But he was learning. He knew how long it took him to learn certain halachos. So he spent his time. What else do you do in prison in pitch black? You review your learning. So he knew exactly how long it would take him to learn this halachos and these halachos, and he knew what time it was, day or night. And then they went out and asked some more riddles, and finally the patient says, "What can I do for you? Ask me, I'll grant you 3 wishes," type of thing. And he, on the spot, he had to come up with an answer. Yes.
I can't say in my mind. Didn't have a plan. I'm sure he had a plan. That doesn't sound.
Well, he had a plan. He was trying to negotiate something. Did he go there with the express desire of saving the Beis Hamikdash? Okay, so Rome could conquer Jerusalem, save the temple. Did he have that in mind? That's what Rabbi Akiva said. He should have. It's exactly what Rabbi Akiva said. You should have said, save the Beis Hamikdash.
Why you negotiate? It's not like it's a machlokas here or there. You're negotiating with the Romans. You can't have a machlokas and have 2 different rabbanim
Well,
say
again,
exact opposite. You all agree. So in his mind, he could have said the best thing is to ask for Yerushalayim. Then if they turn that down, then I'll say, okay, how about you build the Yavne?
you're right. I'm not. You're 100% correct, but that's not what happened. He was under tremendous pressure. Rabbi Akiva criticized him for that. Rabbi Akiva says, Yochanan, you made a mistake. You should have asked for the Beis Hamikdash and Yerushalayim, but you didn't.
I can't believe that he didn't have a plan. They turned this down, then I'll ask for that.
I guess he probably didn't expect Vespasian to respond the way he did. He maybe didn't expect him to be as open-minded as perhaps he was. Now, again, historians view the whole story very differently. Historians will tell you that Yavne was basically a prisoner of war camp. And they took the rabbis who were the leaders, and they took them all to the seacoast place called Yavne as a POW camp. They look at the story very, very differently. And there are many different versions of the encounter between Yochanan ben Zakkai and Vespasian. The story in Ovos to Rav Nosson is not the same as the Gemara in Git, and the story in Eicha Rabbah is a third version. There are a lot of different versions of what actually happened and the sequence of events. But clearly, again, all I wanted to point out is conceptually the debate between compromise versus all-out war. If it's something we really believe in, then it can't be compromised. On the other hand, compromise can save a lot of lives. And this dynamic, this balancing act, is what troubled Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai until his deathbed. He was worried on his deathbed, did I make the right call? Now, fast forward to what's going on right now in Israel. What's the correct response? Should Israel bomb everybody out of existence? Or should they try to negotiate and Hatzalah Porta and save something? It's a difficult, I'm certainly not the one to give an answer. I will say one thing, and this I'll just conclude with this, and I've written about this a number of places. Western-style diplomacy does not work in the Middle East. And that's a big mistake that all these negotiators are making. You can't negotiate with the Arabs with a Western mindset. And that makes it even more difficult to negotiate. What's the end game? What is it that they want? What is it that we want? Now, we know what they want. They want a one state. Israel is not going to commit suicide. So these two, that's what it boils down to in its simplest, with all the other things going on, all the fancy negotiations and headlines and bombs. The bottom line is, Israel is not going to commit suicide. That's it. Now, how do you negotiate your way into a position of survival or thriving and yet keep everybody happy? It's not going to end. It's never going to end. Israel is not going to give up its sovereignty. The Arabs, until the Arabs give up their dream of a one state, of all Arab, and Israel ceases to exist, those two concepts are at loggerheads. And unless there's some compromise that each is willing, and I don't see how it's possible. I don't see how it's possible to have a two-state solution. It's not going to work because neither one is willing to give up anything. And if neither is willing to give up anything, then you're going to be negotiating for the next 200 years.
In 1947, they made a two-state solution.
Yeah, they made it, and the Arabs rejected it because the Arabs don't believe in a two-state solution. The United States is fooling itself if they think that this is a realistic possibility. The Arabs don't want a two-state solution. And as much as some Israelis might think it's possible, it's not. Again, there's political suicide and there's physical suicide. This would be suicide. Israel is not going to vote itself out of existence. And as much as the United States wants to negotiate on behalf of Israel, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. And whatever is going on politically with Netanyahu and the elections, it's all secondary to Israel's existence. Israel, again, negotiation has validity up to a point, but you can't negotiate away your existence. So we're still at loggerheads, and this conflict of negotiation versus rebellion or war is still going on. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and Rabbi Akiva are still arguing. And you have both of these factions in America and in Israel and in the Arab world, and hopefully Mashiach will come to solve the problem. Yeah.
It should be Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and Rabbi Akiva who are still arguing.
Okay. Okay, good point. Good point. But I have to believe there are people of goodwill who would like the fighting to stop, but finding a way that both sides agree upon in order for the fighting to stop is an elusive goal. By definition, it's impossible. Israel is not going to give up its core values, and the Arabs are not going to give up their desire for a one-state solution. So it's going to keep on, it's going to go on. Neither is willing to give up their core beliefs. And that's why the negotiation is not going to work. Warfare is going to continue to a certain extent. And I don't know what the end is. I don't know. But this debate is still going on that we saw in time of the Churban Beis HaMikdash. So hopefully, the Mehera Ibana HaMikdash, Mashiach will come and solve all these problems. And that's what we hope for on Tisha B'Av when we daven for the restoration of Malchus Beis David.
Amen.
Amen.
Wally,
Yes, Howard.
I still have the insurance policy that my father bought from your father 75, 80 years ago.
Oh, I hope you don't cash it in for a long time.
No. And do you remember Dr. Moshe Carmilli from
Yeah, sure. Also
right.
Hungarian.
I had a course when I was in TI, and he said the only reason that Israel is still existing during the war for independence was all the Arabs hate each other.
Yeah. Okay.
And they never defeat Israel.
That is true too. That is true too.
Taking care of.
Have a great day, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you, Wally.
You. Amen. Amen. Amen.